It was 3:47 a.m. when I woke up to find my house glowing like a toxic waste dump. The entire exterior was painted in the most obnoxious shade of neon green I'd ever seen. It was so bright that my neighbor's motion sensor lights kept triggering, thinking the sun had risen 4 hours early. I stood there in my boxers and slippers, coffee mug in hand, staring at what used to be my tasteful beige colonial home in the quiet suburbs of Riverside Heights. This wasn't vandalism. This was the work of our HOA president, Patricia Brennan, a woman who treated the Homeowners Association rulebook like it was scripture and herself like she was the Pope of property values. She'd been after me for months about my refusal to plant her approved selection of decorative bushes. Apparently, my simple lawn wasn't contributing to the neighborhood aesthetic. So, she'd taken matters into her own hands using some obscure bylaw about emergency beautification that she'd probably written herself during last Tuesday's board meeting. I took a long sip of coffee and smiled. Patricia had no idea who she was messing with. See, I'm Samuel Morrison, and before I retired to this supposedly peaceful neighborhood, I spent 30 years as a construction project manager. I knew every building code, every permit requirement, and most importantly, I knew people who could make things happen very, very quietly. The war had started 6 months ago when I moved into number 47, Maple Drive. Patricia showed up on my doorstep within hours of the moving truck leaving, armed with a 3-ring binder and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was in her late 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of outfit that screamed, "I have nothing better to do than make your life miserable." She introduced herself as the HOA president and handed me a welcome packet that was thicker than my mortgage documents. "Your landscaping needs immediate attention," she said with a tone that suggested this was not a suggestion. "The previous owners let things slide, but I run a tight ship. You'll need to install approved shrubbery within 30 days. I looked at my perfectly maintained lawn and back at her. "The grass is healthy. The trees are trimmed. What's the problem?" She actually gasped like I'd suggested burning down the community center. "The problem, Mr. Morrison, is that your property lacks the required aesthetic elements. Page 47, subsection 12 clearly states that all front yards must display a minimum of 6 approved decorative plants." I flipped through her packet and found the page. The approved plant list included exotic species that would cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "I'll think about it," I said and closed the door. That was my first mistake. Never tell an HOA Karen you'll think about it. To them, that's a declaration of war. The citations started arriving within a week. First, it was a warning about my mailbox being half an inch too low. Then, my driveway apparently had unapproved cracks that were bringing down property values. She even cited me for leaving my garbage cans visible from the street for 37 minutes after pickup. Each notice came with increasingly steep fines. I paid them just to avoid the hassle, which was my second mistake. Patricia took my compliance as weakness. Things escalated when she started showing up at odd hours to inspect my property. I'd catch her measuring the height of my grass with an actual ruler at 6 a.m. on Saturdays. She'd photograph my house from every angle, looking for violations. When I installed security cameras, she cited me for not getting architectural approval first. The woman was relentless, but the paint job was her biggest mistake yet. I spent that morning documenting everything. Photos from every angle, video showing the paint dripping onto my driveway, close-ups of my ruined shutters. Then I made some calls. First to my lawyer, who laughed for a solid minute when I told him what happened. Then to my old friend Diego, who ran a specialized construction crew that handled, shall we say, delicate projects. By noon, I had a plan that would make Patricia regret ever messing with Samuel Morrison. The key to dealing with an HOA Karen is understanding that they thrive on control and appearances. Patricia had been president for 8 years, ruling the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She'd driven out anyone who challenged her authority. But she'd never dealt with someone who understood the game better than she did. You see, while she was busy memorizing bylaws, I was studying city ordinances. Turns out, Painting someone's house without proper permits is actually a felony destruction of property charge in our state. But I wasn't going to call the cops. That would be too easy, too quick. Patricia needed to learn a lesson, and I was going to be her teacher. The first step was letting her think she'd won. I didn't react to the paint job publicly. No angry confrontation, no threats of lawsuits. I just went about my day like nothing happened. This confused her. I saw her driving by my house repeatedly, probably expecting to see me out there scrubbing at the paint or yelling at neighbors. Instead, I was inside making preparations. Diego's crew would need precise timing. The security cameras throughout the neighborhood would need to mysteriously malfunction, and Patricia's garage, her pride and joy, where she kept her show car, a pristine 1967 Mustang convertible, would need to vanish without a trace. Not stolen, mind you, just relocated temporarily until certain conditions were met. Patricia's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac backing up to an empty lot owned by a shell company that I happened to have connections with. Her garage was a separate structure built on a concrete slab with post and beam construction. The kind of building that, with the right equipment and expertise, could be lifted and moved intact. Diego had done similar jobs before, relocating historic structures for preservation. This would be child's play for his crew. The neighborhood security system ran on a closed network that I'd helped set up when I moved in, volunteering my expertise to get on Patricia's good side initially. She had no idea I'd built in a back door for maintenance purposes. A few lines of code, and the cameras would record nothing but empty footage for a 6-hour window, just long enough for Diego's crew to work their magic. 3 nights after my house was painted, everything was in place. At exactly 2 a.m., a convoy of specialized trucks rolled silently into Riverside Heights. Diego's crew worked like ghosts, setting up hydraulic jacks at key points around Patricia's garage. The building rose inch by inch so smoothly that the vintage car inside didn't even shift. Within 4 hours, the entire structure was loaded onto a flatbed and heading to a storage facility 30 miles away. I made sure to be visible the next morning, out for my usual jog at 6:30. I wanted witnesses to see me nowhere near Patricia's house when she made her discovery. The scream that echoed through the neighborhood at 7:05 was audible 3 blocks away. I jogged past just as she was standing in her backyard, still in her bathrobe, staring at the empty concrete pad where her garage used to be. "What happened, Patricia?" I asked with genuine concern in my voice. She whirled around, her face a mask of fury and confusion. "My garage? Someone stole my entire garage." She was practically hyperventilating. "Who steals a garage?" The police arrived within minutes, followed by half the neighborhood. Everyone wanted to see the impossible crime scene. A 20 by 24-foot building had simply vanished, leaving only the flat concrete foundation. The detective assigned to the case was baffled. There were no tire tracks, no evidence of heavy equipment, no witnesses. The security footage showed nothing unusual, just an empty backyard all night long. Patricia kept insisting this was connected to her paint job on my house, but without proof, the police had to treat it as a bizarre theft. The insurance company was even more skeptical. They'd never had a claim for a stolen building before. Meanwhile, I hired a legitimate painting crew to restore my house to its original beige. When Patricia tried to stop them, citing HOA violations, I presented her with a cease and desist letter from my lawyer. The letter also mentioned the word felony several times and included photos of my neon greenhouse. Patricia went pale reading it. She knew she'd overplayed her hand, but she still had no idea how connected the two events were. For 3 days, Patricia was a ghost. She didn't leave her house, didn't answer her door, didn't respond to HOA complaints. The vice president had to run the emergency meeting where half the neighborhood showed up to discuss both the illegal paint job and the missing garage. The mood was turning against Patricia fast. People were realizing that if she could paint my house without permission, what else might she do? On day 4, Patricia found a letter in her mailbox. No postmark, no return address. Inside was a single photo of her garage, intact and unharmed, sitting in what looked like a warehouse. The note attached read, "Your garage is safe. If you want it back, 3 things need to happen. 1. You will reimburse Samuel Morrison for all HOA fines and the cost of repainting his house. 2. You will resign as HOA president effective immediately. 3. You will sign a legally binding agreement never to hold any HOA position again." Patricia tried to take the photo to the police, but what could she tell them? That someone was blackmailing her with her own stolen garage? Without admitting to the illegal paint job, she had no leverage. She spent 2 more days trying to find another solution, but Diego's crew had been thorough. The warehouse wasn't traceable. The photo gave no clues to the location. Her precious Mustang was trapped inside, and every day it sat there was another day of depreciation. Finally, Patricia broke. She showed up at my door with a cashier's check for $23,000, covering all the fines and painting costs. She also had a typed resignation letter and the agreement my lawyer had drawn up. Her hands shook as she signed everything. "Where's my garage?" she asked through gritted teeth. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, but I'd heard rumors about a building matching its description being spotted at the old Riverside Industrial Park. Within an hour of Patricia submitting her resignation to the HOA board, her garage miraculously reappeared in her backyard. It was perfectly intact, not a scratch on it. The Mustang inside was untouched, even still had the same amount of gas. The only difference was a small placard attached to the wall that read, "Karma Construction Company. We specialize in instant karma." Patricia tried to have it tested for fingerprints, but the police had already closed the case as recovered property. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Patricia's resignation was accepted unanimously, and the board voted to invalidate all citations issued in the past 6 months. They also passed new bylaws requiring any exterior modifications to homes to be approved by the actual homeowner. Imagine that. Patricia tried to speak during public comment, but the new president, a retired teacher named Nancy, who actually understood the concept of reasonable, cut her off. Patricia moved out of Riverside Heights 2 months later. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday, and she was gone by Friday. I heard she bought a condo in a building with no HOA, probably for the best. Her house sold to a young couple who were delighted to learn that the neighborhood was now under reasonable management. They even complimented my beige house and simple landscaping during their first week. As for me, I still live at 47 Maple Drive. My lawn is still undecorated. My mailbox is still technically half an inch too low, and I still occasionally get compliments on my security camera system from neighbors who remember the great garage heist. Nancy runs the HOA with common sense and courtesy, only issuing citations for actual problems like unmowed lawns or abandoned vehicles. The way it should be. I never told anyone about my involvement in the garage relocation. Diego and his crew were paid well for their discretion, and the warehouse owner was happy to help after hearing the full story. Sometimes when I'm out for my morning jog, I pass by Patricia's old house and remember that neon green nightmare. It reminds me that karma doesn't always happen naturally. Sometimes it needs a little help from someone who knows how to operate a hydraulic jack. The investigation into the garage incident was officially closed as an elaborate prank. Patricia tried to push for further investigation, but gave up when her lawyer advised that pursuing it might lead to questions about the illegal paint job. She paid a $50,000 fine to the city for vandalism and property damage, plus $30,000 in legal fees. The contractor cousin who did the painting lost his license and faced his own fines. Patricia's final HOA board meeting included a vote of no confidence, and she was formally removed from her position with a lifetime ban from serving on any neighborhood committee.